What do you do when you make a rules mistake in a board game? Something that Quackalope knows very, very little about. I've heard it said that we have some of the most accurate gameplays that have ever existed. Why are you laughing?
I'm enjoying this.
You're in the fact that we are one of the most preeminent.
All in on it. Absolutely.
Here's the thing. Quackalope is known for our accuracy, our competency, our clear reading, and analytical breakdown of all rules, all games, all times. That's actually one of our mottos.
Yes, perfection.
One of our mottos. Perfection beyond compare. I want the videos I create and the games I play to be as handsome as the man sitting next to me on a Thursday afternoon, baked in golden sunlight. But every now and then, when you're relying on this man to teach you big box games, mistakes can happen.
Sometimes they do.
Even if they spend 80 hours learning them on a car ride down.
It can happen.
And it's certainly not the publisher's fault.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. We're playing through Gloomhaven right now. We're actually going through, we're probably going to get, I hope, almost done with Crimson Scales Trails of Ashes. We're working on episode 3 right now, and we just finished episode 2. We've had so much fun. So much fun. And yet, there was one little note, one little moment in Gameplay 2 where a creature or two should have spawned. And so it changed the dynamic. It changed the puzzle. And we hit this point. We're 2 hours in. We've had a blast. It's been a challenge. We are struggling to finish. And we realize that it actually should be slightly harder than it was.
Yep.
And so we ask ourselves, like, what do we do? And we wanted to ask you all. We wanted to like, this is a conversation with you, the audience. So please, please, please leave a comment. How do you respond and react when you find, during an active game, that a rules mistake has happened? Whether someone's missed something in reading the rules, someone has taught something wrong, someone has done one of the worst villainous acts in board game industry, which is they've taught people everything but the few rules they need to actually win. That's a horrific, tragic experience, but it can happen when rules and games are complex. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
But I have some notes. I have some like back and forth on what my philosophy around rules mistakes is, how I try to approach and mitigate them, and what happens or what I feel like should happen when you discover one in game.
Yep. And you know, a lot of it is for me based on when the mistake occurred. And how long, how far back was the mistake when you discovered it. I also have quite a few things here of how to prevent mistakes from happening to begin with.
Yeah.
So, we'll throw some of that in there too, because I think, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's the right quote.
Yeah.
It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of chicken feed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then you got to finish the quote.
Okay.
It's worth a pound of chicken feed. You give the chicken feed to the chickens so they can feed the cows. The cows then feed the goats then feed the children grow up to be successful entrepreneurs, except for one named Jim.
Okay.
Jim should have had a little bit of prevention. He went to jail. And then you tell Jim a pound of prevention, or an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of chicken feed, and the whole story starts over again.
That just didn't roll off my tongue that well. I was trying to get there.
Thank you for taking original language is Yiddish. It's complicated when you translate it over to English. It just doesn't flow quite the same. Yeah.
All right. So for me, a rules mistake happens. You catch the mistake. Did it happen on this turn, and you can undo it? And I absolutely, if it's just an honest mistake, we're not here playing super competitive. There's no money on the line. Back up, undo what you did, and retake your turn.
So this is an interesting question.
Fully okay with that.
Interesting question. I even broke down on my notes, competitive versus cooperative. Competitive, I'm agreeing with you when it comes to time. Cooperative, I have a different approach. So let's start with competitive, which is what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
I think my philosophy is in the first third of the game, it's a friendly table. And I'll announce that. I'll say, hey, if you make a mistake, even if it was a turn ago, it's a friendly table. Rework it, redo it, do whatever you need to do to justify and be accurate in your gameplay, especially if you're learning the game. But then I have 2 big rules that come into play. Keep going on yours. I've got 2 I want to mention.
For me, I was going with timing. So if it's a turn right now, and when I play competitive games, for me, I want to win. I'm going to try to win, and I'm going to do everything I can. But I'm not one of those competitive players that is oh my gosh, that's going to affect the outcome of the game, and it's not fair, and you should have to play that as... Like, I'm much more easy, relaxed. We're going to have a good time. And that might even turn into the story. So I'm okay with that. If the mistake happened last round and we've already changed game components around, now that's where I kind of draw a line. I say, all right, you know what? We're just going to move past it.
Yep.
We noticed the mistake. You know, if it's completely inconsequential to everything else that happened, like, oh, I forgot to mark off a token here, and you whatever that is, you mark that off, and it's like, all right, whatever, it didn't affect anything on the board, I'm okay with going back and fixing that.
So that's one of my rules.
Mm-hmm.
Revealed information is almost irreversible.
Mm-hmm.
If it is your first mistake, if it is the first time playing the game, then revealed information you can react. If it was, it's obvious that could have happened. The dice roll, you only had a 1 in 10 chance of getting it. Why didn't you react better? Well, because you just didn't know. So sure. But the two frameworks here, if something has changed in the game state, cooperative or competitive, a card has been flipped, a dice has been rolled, someone has revealed that they're doing something that is going to upset your turn or change your turn, you can't go work that back.
Yeah.
The world has changed. Life has moved on. You suffer for what you've done and the mistakes you've made. Except if you're, like, very first mistake. But then that comes as well. If it's your first mistake, at any point in the game, for almost any mistake, I'll forgive you. But then we acknowledge right then that there's no more mistakes like that coming forward.
Right.
Right?
Communication is key.
You roll a dice, and it jumps out of the dice tray, and it's a 0. You decide then, do dice outside of the dice tray count or not?
Yep.
If they do count, then you take the 0.
Yep.
If they don't count, then I don't care what you've rolled. If it is not in the dice tray,
it doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
Communication is the absolute key, and I think that's, it's one of the things I was going to talk about anyway. To help prevent mistakes and also how to handle mistakes when it is. Communicate the expectation. If you handle a mistake in a vacuum, you say, all right, we're just going to deal with this instance, and then it happens again, and then you're going to deal with... No, you have to communicate to the table, all right, this is how we're going to handle this. When this happens, or this was the one time, everyone on the same page, right? And get buy-in from everybody.
Yep.
That, I think, is the critical piece. So, you touched on something for me there. Where I'm actually a lot more stringent or strict with rules, I'm more strict with cooperative than I am with competitive.
Interesting.
Because I feel like the cooperative experience is us versus the game, and... You
want to defend the game's right to be played.
Right. Like, I'm more strict, I'm far more strict, especially a solo game. And here's, sometimes it's not even like, necessarily rules. This is getting a little bit of adjacent, but like this War of Mine. Love that game.
Okay.
You're like, all right, do you want to feed that, homeless guy that just knocked on your door, or do you want to send him away? And you decide, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and feed him. And then he shoots you in the face. And you're like, don't! And you're like, maybe I send him away. I don't do that. I can't, it's something in my brain where I'm like, I have to live with this. And if I make a mistake in a cooperative game, even if it's you and I doing this, I'm more of the opinion that, hey, we now have to... We made this game a little harder for ourselves than it needed to be. We made a mistake that, we got to live with it. Whether it benefited us or not, I'm far more strict with cooperative games than I am competitive games.
I'm a strong advocate that in any game you're going to make mistakes for and against you. And in a cooperative, specifically campaign game, you're going to make enough that they balance out. That's what I believe. I don't know, because I don't know the mistakes I've made and the ones I make that benefit me or don't benefit me, because they're mistakes, and you usually pass them up until you post them online, and then everyone criticizes you, and then you cry in the closet by yourself for a long time before coming out, and people are very confused. I'm happily married. But he's cute.
Be comfortable with
Here's
yourself.
the thing. Here's the thing. I think it balances itself out. And I also think you never play board games right. I thought you did play board games right before I started creating content. I very quickly learned I never play board games right. No one at the table really does, because there's a lot of little nuanced elements to keep an eye on and parts to run and understand. So, if it's obvious, I like reworking it. In a cooperative or a solo game, if it's obvious, if it's just like, oh yeah, why in the world did I ever do that? I'm going to lose the game now because this guy shot me in the face, and I know, because I've met him before, and this same card always shoots me in the face. There's no other option. So, no, I'm not going to feed him. I'm going to rework that, and I'm going to continue playing because I want to sit and I want to play a game.
Should have known better.
I understand. I don't have a memory that supports me not being forgiving to myself. Mm-hmm. My other rule, though, when it comes to competitive games specifically, if you're in the last third of the game, there's a middle third that's a gray area. But if you're in the last third of the game, you need a unanimous vote. Everyone at the table has to approve any game-shifting, game-altering rules correction. Mm-hmm. Hey, I missed getting my resource. Okay. Hey, everyone, are we okay if they get that resource? Hey, I didn't take the action I was looking for, or I forgot to cycle my cards, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm cool with you doing it. I'm always on the side of, for the most part, unless it's going to change victory, unless we're right there, I'm pretty much always on the side of being friendly to you, but I'm also very comfortable looking at someone and then being like, I don't really want them to have the resource, and going, I'm sorry, you can't have it. Yeah. I agree with them. I agree with them. If they don't want you to have it, we're not at a point in the game where you can change things.
Yeah, I agree with. I can agree with that. For me, the prevention piece of it, and I want can I give a couple, or do you want to get in?
So I have one more thing I want to add, and then let's get to the prevention side of it.
All right.
My rules, I said for competitive game. Mm-hmm. My rules is that third system. Right. You can change things. It's very friendly. Then it's kind of in a weird middle ground, and then you need dramatic approval from everyone around the table. Mm-hmm. That's a competitive game.
Yeah.
When it comes to a cooperative experience, I believe that you're going to make mistakes, and I am an advocate for never, other than spending 30 seconds maybe, don't go digging in the rules. Don't go searching too deeply on BGG. Here's my approach. Final Girl lays it out. Final Girl sets it up. Thematic, strategic, solo puzzle of a game it is. In the back of the rulebook it says, hey, if you're in the middle of a game and you come across something that you just don't understand or it doesn't make sense and you can't quite resolve it quickly, what do? You do one of these three things. Mm-hmm. You either tell the story. You play thematically accurate. Or you're mean to yourself. You do Kingdom Death's Rule of Death, right? The idea of, for the sake of moving the game forward, you do whatever is worse for you. That's fair. Mm-hmm. You're probably ruling in your favor more often than you realize. So let the game punish you a little bit. Supports your function of, why can't the game just be mean? Or three. And this is the one that I actually think is really cool that they included it. You do whatever is the most fun.
Yes.
If you're playing a game and you miss something, for instance, we missed spawning some characters. That stinks. It should have been a little bit harder. Do you know what isn't fun? It's not fun replaying a scenario that we've spent 2 hours in. It's not fun pretending like we have to come up with some unique solution. Like, oh, well, instead of that end game, let's just change the puzzle. Let's kill the characters, which is one of the things I suggested. I was like, should we just wipe them out? It's not fun trying to debuff, shift, or interrupt the flow of a game. Yeah, a mistake was made. Mm-hmm. So let's move forward. Yep. What is the most fun? And in Final Girl specifically, it's saying, rule in favor of
fun.
Like,
chaos.
What is cool? Is it cool to be able to, like, drop a grenade in that area and blow up 7 people, including all of the little, like, other Final Girls or other, like, victims that are standing in that area, and also kill the boss or near kill the boss at the same time? Yeah, that's cool. So, what can you do? Do that. Why not? Game. Move forward. Check the rules later. Go to BGG. Ask questions. Of course. Get rules right. But in the middle of the game, preserve the sake of the game. Play thematically accurate. Play mean to the players. Rule of death times whatever. Or rule for the sake of fun. And be consistent with one of those three.
Yeah.
If you're ruling mean, rule mean. If you're ruling fun, rule fun.
So here's some prevention ideas for how to avoid mistakes before they happen. 1, don't overshoot your group and read your room. All right. So when you're selecting the game that you're going to play, and you've got some people who, Catan is I love board games. I've played Catan 100 times.
Yeah.
You're not going to bring them...
I think 100 times you've played?
Back in the day, I don't think 100 times, but I played Catan a lot.
How many times? You're going to lose a lot of respect.
This is before I knew
I've just
BG
completely
stats.
derailed your statement.
I played Catan.
Oh, you're just committing to it?
Yeah, I played Catan. I used to play Catan a lot back, 15, 20 years ago. Absolutely. It was the only game I knew of. Is that bad?
No, I love Catan. I just think it's funny that I've completely derailed your message.
Oh, anyways.
People are going to yell at me in the comments, though. It's like 4 a.m. We've been filming all day.
So read the room. Bring out games that are appropriate for the group that you're playing with. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Next is the, refresh the rules before you play the game. If you sit down to a game that you haven't played in 5 or 6 months and you're hosting game night and you haven't gone through and refreshed yourself on the rules, you're going to run into a lot of mistakes.
I'm pretty sure I know enough to...
You probably
Listen, I want my game group to play Kingdom Death, and I'm pretty sure, because I've been taught by like 4 other people how to play, I know how to run the game. Why would I need to read the rules?
I don't know. So that's...
You're labeling things I make mistakes on. You realize
We all do this. Sometimes it's just time. You get stuck at work, you're like, man, people are going to be over here in 20 minutes. Next, assign and divide the responsibility. So, like for Gloomhaven, for example, somebody's managing the element board. Sure. Someone else is managing the damage. Someone else is managing the conditional tokens.
I don't even think I know how to run characters, like run the AI for the enemy bosses in Kingdom Death anymore. Shira always does it.
And she probably does an outstanding job.
And she has no idea how to build gear.
Yes, divide and conquer and give other people responsibilities for some segment. It solves a lot of problems. Yeah. And do things systematically. So this, fits the fire service as well. You have a process in which you do things, and you do it the same way every single time. Okay. And, if this thing goes on that shelf, it always goes on that shelf. That way, every time you need that, you go get it and bring it back.
Always there.
So same thing. And this is kind of like chaotic for me, because this is not how I set up Gloomhaven, but, so I'm kind of doing a little bit of the, all right, what are we doing here? Sure. But if you have things set up systematically where it's in the same order, too. So if you're going to do the order of operations, hey, let's stick with this, and this. Rather than, sometimes I do this first, sometimes I do that first, unless that's the nature of the game. Mm-hmm. But where you can have systematic, routine, set it up. And then lastly, get a few gameplays in a short period of time. That way you learn a game, you play, get that game to the table 5, 6 times over the course.
Don't do it once and then walk away.
And then come back 3 months later, play it once. You just won't remember the rules. You'll make a lot of mistakes that way.
The one thing I have, because I didn't have a lot of these. I'm glad you brought this element up into the conversation. Something I've learned from filming and from producing this content. Mm-hmm. Always, especially with a new game, talk your turns.
Yes.
Don't do anything in silence. And a lot of people will play heavy Euro games or any of these puzzles, and they'll just kind of sit there, or they'll scroll on their phone while other people are doing things. One of the reasons I love filming and love playing on camera is because both people have a responsibility to the viewer and the camera. Yeah. So that means they're talking through their turns, they're thinking through their thoughts, they're playing cards and announcing what they're doing, and you will catch so many subtle mistakes.
Absolutely.
And you can do this solo too. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I love playing solo on camera because I'll sit down and I'll talk through the strategy and the thoughts and the guidelines and what I'm doing, and I'll even do it when there's not cameras around, and I will catch myself because I'm hearing myself speak in a way that I never do or never would if I was just in my own mind.
I've absolutely done this. I've sat down with solo games, and just recently it was Robinson Crusoe, and I'm talking to myself and realizing there's no one else in the room, and I'm talking out loud about all right, well, if I go for the basket over here, maybe I should do that, or no, I need to build a tent. Man, I do that all the time. Absolutely, I think in competitive games especially. You talk through your turns. Some people can catch a mistake and be like, oh, you're right, I can't do that.
For sure.
Otherwise, you just don't know, and then you catch it 3 turns later.
And it's also, honestly, more fun to have everyone engaged at the table. Something that just popped into my mind that I don't think anyone is crazy enough to have done, although the person who taught me Feudum, they actually kind of did this. They built a plan. They rewrote the rules in their own words. And the thing that popped into my mind is there's different levels of knowledge retention when it comes to academics.
Yeah.
Right? There's the level of knowledge retention that involves listening, reading, writing, articulating, teaching,
Yeah.
right? So there's this scale. And one of those important ones that's a higher level than reading is writing.
Yeah.
If you find that you're oftentimes missing a rule, or you're missing a mechanic, or you just can't get something quite figured out, rewrite it in your own words, or write that rule 10 times on a page. Get it ingrained in you through some physical action. That could be playing the game, but if you're missing it because there's other things that are distracting you.
That's actually a really good suggestion. If you just jot down, you can say, like, hey, we noticed that we got this rule wrong a few times. Write in your own rule where it's that, and then put that paper in the box.
Yep.
And now, each time you do that, you might have 3, 4, 10 things on that paper.
We have a video series called 10 Rules You Might Miss. That is almost
That's really what
verbatim
that is.
the
So now
way
when
that
you
we
pull
do
that game out, you're like, I got the rule book, but I also know the 10 things that we've gotten wrong enough that we wrote it down.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, actually.
I would
do that.
love to know how you all find, identify, prevent, learn, table, play the board games that you have. The challenge of rules is a challenge that I think we all suffer with and are faced with. And I'd love to know how you resolve it when it comes to the game table. Are we too easy? Are we too hard? Like, what's your... I know some game groups that a rules mistake is you can't shift that.
Yeah, I look at it like if you're that diligent on rules, maybe video games where you can't necessarily break the rules, that's more your speed.
You could probably still break the rules.
I like the mods, yeah. Okay, I've played Call of Duty, I know.
Whatever the case, whatever you do, remember the important thing. Rules are meant to be broken. Why else would they make the books so thick and impossible to remember? As long as I don't get caught by myself or anyone else, they always catch me. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I would have no problems if it wasn't for you all. I'd get everything right.
Everything right, and you'd win every game.
Appreciate you all being here. Love to have the conversation. We'll see you later.